Hello, first graders. Happy Wednesday. It's me, Mr. B, thinking about you and about Easter and hoping that we can read some really awesome nonfiction about the first Easter. But first, ready? Let's say hi to each other the way we always do. Elbow, elbow, namaste. Hope you're doing well. I hope you're enjoying the warmer weather this week and getting outside and playing. But while you are in school, one of the most important things we're doing is really thinking about why does somebody like Carol Heyer write a book like The First Easter? And her purpose, well, it depends on if it's fiction or nonfiction. Well, did this book that we started yesterday, was it teaching us about the real world or was it a make-believe story? So let's take a quick look. It's about the first Easter, and it started out talking about when Jesus was born and then about the things that he did on earth. So it's like a biography. It's a history, a true story. It's teaching us all about the life of Jesus, which leads up to the first Easter. So this is nonfiction, and so we know the author's purpose was to teach us about the first Easter. And some of the details that we want to get into our head for the rest of our lives were that on the Sunday leading up to Holy Week, Palm Sunday, Jesus came into the capital of Israel, Jerusalem, but he came in riding on a donkey. Many people expect him to come riding on a great, powerful horse, but he came in on a donkey, which is the animal that you would have if you weren't, if you were too poor to own a horse, you would own a donkey. So he came in riding on a donkey, and people threw palm branches on the ground to comfort or to pad the donkey's hooves. And they said cries of Hosanna. They were so excited because they thought that Jesus was coming to help them get free from the Romans. Well, it turns out that when Jesus got into Jerusalem, the first thing he did is he went into the temple, the main church in Jerusalem, and he saw that there were people buying and selling things and trading money and doing things that had nothing to do with God. And Jesus got furious and he said, "This is a house of prayer and you are doing things that are not appropriate in a house of prayer." So he threw their money down to the ground and he told them to get out of the temple. And then he sat and he prayed to God. Well, you can imagine the people who got tossed out of the temple, who were used to being able to do whatever they wanted in the temple, they were not happy. The other folks who were not happy were the leaders of the temple, because they were used to being in charge and in power. And when Jesus talked to them, they tried to trick him. They tried to get Jesus to say things that would get him in trouble with the king, King Herod, or with the Roman leaders. What Jesus told them was that God wanted them to love God with all your heart and to love your neighbor as yourself. So the leaders of the church were perplexed by this because they didn't think that Jesus had the power or the right or the authority to tell others what God wanted. They thought that only they were allowed to do that. They didn't believe that Jesus was the Son of God. So that's how far we read yesterday. It's always good to just reread the last page. So we'll reread the last page just to make sure that we remember where we're at, and then we'll go forward. So it said more and more people listened to Jesus as he taught them about God. The temple leaders and priests grew very afraid of Jesus, and they began to plot. It means they began to come up with a plan against him, and they looked for a way to have Jesus arrested. Well, when we get to Thursday of Holy Week, that was the night of the feast where they were going to celebrate the Passover meal. And so Jesus and his disciples gathered together for this meal. Now, one thing that's not in the book, but that's kind of interesting to know, is that Jesus knew that people were trying to have him arrested. And his disciples knew. So Jesus and his disciples, they had to hide in a upper room of a house where they wouldn't be found. And then they were sitting at the table, and this is where we get our sacrament